guys, Josh from SoccerReviewsForYou.com, bringing you a comparison video today between the Nike Hypervenom Phinish and the Nike Mercurial Vapor 10, two thin synthetic lightweight shoes from Nike that at quick glance may appear to be quite similar to each other, but the reality is they fit, feel, and perform very differently. And we're going to talk about those differences in today's video, covering pretty much every single category. So if you're interested in learning more about both of these two shoes and perhaps having trouble on which one to buy, this video should help you out tremendously. And at the end, you should have a pretty good idea of which of these two models is best suited for yourself personally. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, watch the entire video. And with that being said, let's get right into the comparison. To start things off, let's talk about the uppers. Now, in theory, these are both thin synthetic soccer shoes, which is why a lot of people have trouble deciding between one or the other. But the reality is, while they're both thin synthetics, the type of synthetic that they've actually used is very, very different on both of these shoes, and it really does impact the way they fit and feel on feet. So first similarity you're going to find, besides them both being thin synthetics, is the one-piece construction, which is an element that some people love and some people hate. What I'm talking about is the upper is technically one piece or seamless. There is a fused on piece of material that is technically different than the rest of the upper on both of these shoes, but as you guys can see, it's completely seamless. There's no actual tongue there. It looks like it's one piece. On the Vapor 10, the laces run down the middle of the shoe, and on the Phinish, the laces are slightly off-center to the outside. But again, it's the same type of system, with the center part being this slightly stretchy, thin synthetic material. Now, the reason why some people don't like it is because, one, it makes the shoe a little bit more difficult to put on and take off. And two, depending on how the shoe fits you, you can have some very slight folds in the center part of the shoe where the tongue would normally be positioned, just because of the one-piece construction. That's not something that I personally have issues with, and it's not really going to impact the feel of wearing the shoe, but it is something that does bother some people. So just keep that in mind if you plan on picking these up. What I really like about this system is the double lace holes. So you can see that the laces go in one and out the other, which does a really good job of keeping the actual laces tight in all the spots where you tighten them. And what's also great about this one-piece system is it doesn't allow the shoe to actually open up while it's on your foot, which helps, again, to keep your shoes tighter in the long run. So you'll find that if you wear a regular pair of shoes in a game, at halftime they've loosened up significantly from when you first started. You don't necessarily have that same problem due to this one-piece construction on both of these two shoes. Now, as far as actual synthetic uppers go, the Vapor 10 features what they call Tasian synthetic, and out of the two, it's definitely the thinnest. So if you want the thinnest feel, the closest thing to barefoot, not only is the Vapor 10 the better option over the Hypervenom Phinish, I really feel like this is the best option on the market at the moment, just as far as thin synthetics in general go. So very soft synthetic, despite being very thin. Normally you would expect a synthetic material this thin to feel kind of plasticky. You don't get that sensation from this shoe at all. As far as structure goes, it does have an internal fused on support cage that you can see slightly from the outside. It is of course on the inside, but since I can't open up the shoe, I can't really show it to you. But again, once you slide this shoe on your foot, it is a Mercurial, so obviously it does have that really tight kind of one-to-one fit, no rollover, extremely responsive, and the overall shoe is very light as well. So it feels as close to barefoot as you can possibly get from a pair of soccer shoes at the moment. And as far as touch is concerned, super thin. The material moves nicely with your foot. No overlapping material, so it's very, very consistent. You have the micro texturing on the surface of the upper, which is very similar on both of these two shoes, although I would say that the Vapor 10 does feel slightly grippier on the ball. And again, ACC, all conditions control, is a feature you're going to find on both of these models as well, so that's not really a deciding factor either. With the Hypervenom Phinish, you're going to find that it's made from what Nike is calling Nike skin. Now, obviously, there is a Hypervenom Phinish and then there's a Hypervenom Phantom 2. Now, unlike the Superfly 4 and the Vapor 10, which are two entirely different shoes, the Phinish and the Phantom 2 are pretty much exactly the same except for the heel area. The Phinish has a traditional cut like we saw in the Phantom 1 and like we see on most shoes out there, whereas the Phantom 2 has the mid-cut design with the dynamic fit collar, which does change up the rear portion of the actual shoe, but not the upper. So the overall feel is pretty much exactly the same, so just keep that in mind. As far as how the synthetic actually feels, it is thin, although not quite as thin as what you're going to get from the Vapor 10, and it doesn't necessarily feel plasticky, but it does feel quite rigid. It doesn't have the same softness on your foot. When you put these on for the first time, you're going to find that it's a little bit harder than you perhaps might be expecting. It does become more flexible over time, but it never feels soft on your foot. It doesn't have that kind of natural sensation like you get from the Vapor 10. With that being said, it doesn't fit as tight either. It is a different shape than what you're going to find from the Mercurial line. Definitely wider, so if you want the wider of the two thin synthetic models from Nike, the Hypervenom Phinish definitely is wider than what you're going to get from the Vapor 10. As far as structure and support and responsiveness is concerned, this definitely does beat out the Vapor 10. The material alone is significantly more rigid, which does give you a nice lockdown sensation. Plus you have the added flywire cables that run on the lateral and medial side from the base of the sole into the lacing system. So when you pull the laces tight, your foot is very secure, locked in place, and it's just not moving at all. Definitely one of the most responsive shoes currently out there on the market. But again, really depends on what you're looking for. If you want the thinnest, kind of closest to barefoot feel possible, and also something that's extremely lightweight, but at the same time responsive, the Vapor 10 is what you're looking for. Whereas if you want something that is thin, but at the same time still feels very, very solid, and you don't necessarily mind a firmer feel to the upper of the shoe, and of course you want something that's extremely responsive, the Hypervenom Phinish is definitely the better choice. As far as sole plates and stud patterns go, there's not a whole lot that separates these two shoes. The sole plates actually feel pretty similar. On the Vapor 10, the sole plate is made from a compressed nylon material, which is the thinner of the two sole plates, and I would argue is more flexible than what you're going to get from the Phinish, whereas the Phinish features a glass nylon sole plate that is noticeably thicker and slightly stiffer as well, but you're just going to notice a stiffer overall sensation when wearing the Phinish in general. As far as the stud patterns are concerned, they're kind of variations of the same thing, if that makes any sense. With the Mercurial Vapor 10, you're getting a Mercurial stud pattern, which obviously is going to feature all bladed studs, which makes for really, really aggressive multi-directional traction, but not quite as much maneuverability, that freedom to twist and pivot when you're planted, whereas the Hypervenom Phinish pretty much features the exact same layout as the Mercurials, but with conical studs instead of bladed ones, so you're not getting quite the same bite when pushing off, but you are getting that freedom to twist and pivot when the studs are dug into the ground. So again, it really depends on what you're looking for. Both of these shoes provide excellent traction. I didn't have any issues on firm natural grass with either of them. And of course, both of these shoes are also available in AG as well as soft ground pro variations, depending on what type of surface that you're going to be using them on. But as far as firm ground shoes go, if you want the best possible grip, the Vapor 10 is probably the better choice, whereas if you want something that's kind of more of an all-around shoe in terms of the type of feel that it provides, the stud pattern on the Hypervenom, you might prefer a little bit more, but ultimately you shouldn't have any issues with either of these two stud patterns. In terms of weight, these are two of the lightest models on offer from Nike at the moment. So for the sake of comparison, I'm going to weigh them both for you today in real time using this scale. Keep in mind these are both in brand new condition and both the exact same size 9 US. So this is a very fair comparison. We'll start off with the Vapor 10, throw it on the scale, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.4 ounces, the equivalent of 181 grams. So remember those numbers. And by the way, the Vapor 10 is actually the lightest top-end shoe currently on offer from Nike, even lighter than the Superfly 4. Next, we're going to throw on the Hypervenom Phinish, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.95 ounces, the equivalent of 197 grams. So the difference between these two shoes is roughly half an ounce. Is it a significant amount of weight? In hand, not so much, but in terms of how both of these two shoes feel on feet, the Vapor 10 just feels lighter, and that's for a couple of different reasons. One, the upper is thinner. Two, the sole plate is thinner and also more flexible. And three, it has a tighter fit overall. So it just feels like it's more kind of one-to-one on your foot and just thinner in general, which, like I said, makes them feel a little bit lighter. That's not to say that the Hypervenom Phinish feels heavy by any means. They're very, very light on your feet. But like I said, if we're comparing both of these two shoes, I would argue that the Vapor 10 does feel a little bit lighter. Not a lot, but something that you will notice ever so slightly. So again, if you want the lightest of light, Vapor 10, definitely the better option here. But if you just want a light shoe in general, you shouldn't have any problems with either the Vapor or the Phinish. All right, so here is a look at the Vapor 10 and the Hypervenom Phinish on feet. Left foot Hypervenom Phinish, right foot Mercurial Vapor 10. Now in terms of how these things fit and feel, they're both relatively comfortable shoes, they're both thin synthetics, and they both offer a tight fit. that's what's similar between the two of them. They also feel pretty light on your feet as well. With the Vapor 10, it's definitely the tighter fitting of the two shoes, like I mentioned earlier in the video. It has a very slim profile. It wraps your foot pretty much almost exactly, so there's no extra space on the inside whatsoever. And the upper has more of a slightly stretchy sensation to it in comparison to what you're going to have from the Finish, which is not as thin, not as flexible, not quite as soft against your foot, and like I said, lacks really any kind of stretch or give to it whatsoever. So some people will kind of describe that as somewhat uncomfortable. Some people really like how that feels. It's really a matter of personal preference at the end of the day. But if you want something that's thinner and tighter, Vapor 10 is definitely what you want. Whereas if you want something that's still thin, but at the same time feels very solid and secure on your foot, the Hypervenom Finish is the better choice. As far as width is concerned, like I mentioned, the Hypervenom is slightly wider. So if you do have a wider foot, these aren't necessarily a great option because neither of these two shoes are really going to stretch all that much. But out of the two, the Finish is definitely wider and will be suitable for most foot types. As far as the Vapor 10 is concerned, a tighter shoe. If you've worn Mercurials in the past, you shouldn't have any issues with these at all. But if you do have wide feet, again, not a great option for you at all. As far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing my usual size 9 US in both of these two shoes, and the fit and the length in both of them is pretty much perfect. So whether you're looking to buy the Hypervenom Finish or the Nike Mercurial Vapor 10, they both run true to size. So if you do want the best possible fit, going for your normal size is the way to go. So just to sum things up again, the Vapor 10 is thinner, tighter, and just more flexible on your foot, whereas the Hypervenom Finish is a little bit wider, much more kind of rigid and secure and locked in and responsive. And at the end of the day, it's really a matter of personal preference. I personally find the Vapor 10 a little bit more comfortable, but you shouldn't have any issues with discomfort with either of these two shoes. All right, guys, that is it for my comparison between the Nike Hypervenom Finish and the Nike Mercurial Vapor 10. All of you guys always want to know what is my favorite of the two. And for me personally, while neither of these shoes are really my style when it comes to what I like in a pair of soccer shoes, I tend to prefer something that's a little bit thicker and has more of a soft padded sensation, which neither of these shoes provide. But again, if I were picking between these two models, I personally prefer the Nike Mercurial Vapor 10, mainly because I just prefer the more flexible, slightly more comfortable feel that they provide on feet. Not to mention, it's just a good shoe in general, but you can say that about both of these two models. There's no wrong choice here. Again, at the end of the day, it really depends on what your preferences are, and that's how you should go about choosing between the Vapor and the Finish from Nike. So if you guys are interested in either of these two shoes, there'll be links to the review pages on my website down below in the description of this video. If you follow those links, it'll take you to the review page where you'll find buy it now links with exclusive SR4U coupon codes where you'll be able to pick up either of these two shoes in all the currently available colorways below their normal retail prices, which both of these shoes happen to retail for $200 US. So again, if you're interested in either of these two shoes, links are down below in the description. Go ahead and check it out. If you have any further questions regarding the Vapor 10 or the Hypervenom Finish, leave them down below in the comment section. I definitely will get an answer out to you. If you enjoyed today's video, found it helpful and informative, be sure to support it with a like. If you have any other suggestions for comparison videos that you'd like to see, leave those suggestions down below in the comment section as well. Subscribe if you haven't already for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear. You can find all my social media information down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. And as always, thanks for watching.